Welcome back. Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides were the greatest of the Greek tragic dramatists. Of the three, Euripides speaks the most directly to the modern reader. Aeschylus and Sophocles may possess greater depths or a nobler tragic vision, but their manner and matter is strange to us. As soon as we read Euripides, however, we recognize a familiar way of staging, characterization, and dialogue. Go grab your book and get out a marking utensil because we're going to go to certain lines and it will be helpful for you to mark them and annotate some of your thoughts as we discuss them. Then when you read the play, you will have a greater understanding as you get to those parts. How many generations of dramatists have learned from this ancient Greek? And where else have we seen those passionate, twisted individuals who follow their turbulent courses throughout his plays? As we read Euripides, we remember characters and incidents in Shakespeare and other dramatists even closer to our time. Macbeth, Romeo, and Juliet, in their twisted distortion, they kill for either power or for love. Many scholars have criticized Euripides for his grim and terrible stories, but they all agree that his plays are great, well-made pieces of dramatic art that reveal the evil and suffering in human existence and man's tragic action in the face of these ills. The Medea is probably the best known of Euripides' plays to modern readers. When it was first presented in Athens in 431 BC, it was considered a very inferior production by the judges, but it soon rose to first rank as a model of Greek dramatic genius and was imitated or translated by later dramatists all the way from the ancient Roman Seneca to the modern American Robinson Jeffers. This strange and terrible play, with its perennial dramatic power, was based on the ancient Greek myth of Jason and the Golden Fleece. The Greek audiences which saw this play knew the traditional legend before they came to the theater. They came to see what new image the dramatist would create out of the fixed, already known details of the old story. In the myth, Jason was required by his wicked uncle, who was usurping his throne, to perform an impossible feat before he could become king. And that was to obtain the Golden Fleece, which hung on an oak in the faraway kingdom of Colchis, guarded by a dragon that never slept. Jason sailed on the ship Argo with a crew of 50 great heroes, including Orpheus, Hercules, and Theseus, called Argonauts. You may have heard the name Jason and the Argonauts. Well, the king of Colchis agreed to give Jason the Golden Fleece if he would first yoke 2 fire-breathing oxen and sow the dragon's teeth. He was able to accomplish these feats only through the aid of Medea, the king's daughter, who had fallen in love with him and who possessed magic powers. She fled with Jason and the Argonauts when they escaped from Colchis with the Golden Fleece. Taking her brother along, she killed him, cut him into pieces, and scattered the pieces along the road to delay her father's pursuit. When Jason returned to his homeland, his wicked uncle still denied him the throne. Medea tricked the usurper's daughter into cutting her father into pieces and boiling him, on the pretext that she would thereby be retired to youth. After the uncle died, his son banished Jason and Medea from the kingdom. They went into exile at Corinth, where they had lived happily until Jason decided to divorce Medea in order to marry the daughter of the king of Corinth. Medea retaliated by making the princess and the king suffer a painful death and by killing the 2 sons Medea had borne Jason. She then flew away to Athens in a chariot drawn by winged dragons. Out of those gruesome details, Euripides had to choose a single theme for his play. He chose Medea's revenge against Jason for casting her down in order to rise in the world. He produces a powerful dramatization of a hellish fury of a woman scorned. The whole is staged in such a way that we may believe in and be moved by the appalling vengeance of a mother who would kill her own children in order to spite their father. The audience and reader, in their terror, ask, how could a mother do such deeds? How are such things humanly possible? How could the human heart be so twisted and evil? Is she correct in trying to right the wrongs done to her? On page 20 of your book, follow along with me. In the last fourth of the page, the nurse ruminates on Medea's action and says she is, quote, deep in passion and unrelenting. What will she do now, stung with insult? What power does revenge have on a soul? We might like to think that Medea is a cautionary tale on the horrors that revenge can cause. You might want to stop this video for a second and take a few moments to mark in your book right here, and what are your thoughts about her choices and her thoughts and what she's doing. Last year, as we read Frankenstein, we saw the horrors that the beast's revenge had on Victor Frankenstein's family and friends. Do you see any similarities between that horrible story and this one? In the play and in the myth, we see no retribution, but what consequences do you think Medea may and ought to suffer from her choices? And what is the difference between revenge and justice? What would justice look like if you were to rewrite the story in your own words? Some of these questions may be on the Google Doc, and you'll be able to dig in and find out what you think about these decisions that Medea has made. In the first scene with Jason, apparently, now we're going to go into a summary of this play so that you can get into the play and be able to know what you're reading so that you can look for ideas and thoughts and epiphanies that you have. So in this first scene with Jason, apparently their first meeting since his new marriage, Medea tells him all she has done for him, how she saved his life and secured the Golden Fleece for him, betrayed her own family and country, only to be rewarded by his desertion of her. But Jason refuses to have a guilty conscience and defends what he has done. He says that it was the love god, Eros, that saved him by making her love him. So she does not deserve the credit. Besides, he has more than repaid her by bringing her to Greek civilization. No one would have ever heard about her if she had remained in Colchis. Obviously here, Jason is prejudiced against all foreigners and elevates his own country of Greece. Finally, he has married the Corinthian princess merely as a matter of prudence, seeking future security for himself and his sons, and thus for her too. Medea retorts that he is a clever, lying villain who decided to ensure his old age by getting rid of his inconvenient wife and marrying the king's daughter. She hotly refuses to accept any aid from him to support her and the children in exile. Exile just means that they're banned from the kingdom. Now, in this dramatic confrontation, Medea has to alternate her passionate outspokenness with craft and guile in order to accomplish her purpose. First, she arranges with the king of Athens to give her sworn sanctuary in his kingdom. She needs to make sure that she can run somewhere after what she's going to do. Next, she calls Jason back to tell him she is sorry about the way she talked to him. She was a weak, childish woman, but now she has thought better of it and wants him to take care of the children. She asks Jason to take them to the princess with fine gifts, especially prepared for her by Medea, so that she will be more ready to accept the boys into her home. Jason fatuously and smugly accepts the new turn as the victory of good sense over womanly weakness and vanity, and trots off toward his new bride, along with the boys and the gifts. Medea's gifts are a robe of finest tissue and a chaplet crown of chased gold. The princess, mollified by the fine gifts, puts them on and admires herself in the mirror, but she soon shrieks in agony, for the chaplet burns her to death, and the robe, permeated with destructive drugs, consumes her flesh and bones. Her grief-stricken father, King Creon, clasps her in his arms and dies from the contact with a robe as the destructive drugs eat away his body too. All this happens off stage. Remember the Greek word obscene? And we learn about this from a messenger as he tells it to Medea. And she is exultant at the news. But the more terrible deed remains to be done in order to strike down Jason, which is killing his children and hers. By this time they've returned to the house before the deaths occurred. This deed, the most horrible of them all, is bound to strike Jason in his very vitals by rendering him childless. It is probably true, as he says, that he did not love the Corinthian princess, and King Creon means nothing to him personally. But the sons of his loins mean everything: his future, his descendants, his immortality. This blow will strike home, and Medea will have complete revenge. We probably will have talked about this by now, but families mean everything to people. Children mean everything to parents, especially children who will take care of them in their old age and who will bury them respectfully and will honor their names always. So this is a huge blow for Jason. Yet Medea in Euripides' play is a woman, and she's not a monster. She has to go through a struggle between the natural loving kindness of a mother for her children and the furious vengeance of a woman scorned. In what is probably the most touching passage of the play, she goes through emotions of sorrow, horror, reluctance, abandonment of her awful purpose, acceptance of the necessity of her children's death. She goes forward and backward from, I cannot, no, I will not do it, to, out upon my craven heart, repenting of her soft words, back again to, do not, my heart, oh, do not do this deed, and then again to resolution, with a new note, die they must in any case, at the hands of Creon's avenging kin. Finally, after kissing and weeping over the boys, she sends them into the house and realizes, and all of this is on pages 48 through 50. Then on page 50, in the bottom half, just before the chorus, she says, the horror of what I am to do. But anger, the spring of all life's horror, masters my resolve. And then she's resolved to do it. And when she goes in to do the deed, convinced that she is saving the children from execution at harsher hands, and this would be by Creon's kin, she says, and this is on page 55 towards the bottom, no cowardice, no tender mercies. Forget that you once loved them, that of your body they were born. For one short day forget your children. Afterwards weep. Though you kill them, they were your beloved sons. Life has been cruel to me. It is a terrible moment as we hear the piteous pleading of the boys for help against the murderous blows of their mother, and the chorus tries vainly to stop the murder, pounding on the barred doors of the house in the stage presentation. Jason arrives in the hope of saving the boys from the vengeance of Creon's kin, he thinks, but finds out that they have already been destroyed through the vengeance of the woman he deserted. The former hero, who in his glorious youth brought back the Golden Fleece from Colchis, and who has sought in middle age to obtain comfort and security through an opportunistic marriage, is now a pathetic figure. He has lost everything, and he is impotent to strike back against Medea, whose magic powers once brought him glory, but now enable her to talk to him from midair on a chariot drawn by dragons. She even refuses to give him the boys' corpses to bury and lament, and keeps them at her side. She curses him and prophesies his ignominious death. That means a shameful death. Jason complains to heaven about her deeds and wails a dirge for his sons, and the chorus chants the moral. Now, I am on the last page of the play, on page 61. So the chorus chants the moral. Quote, "Many are the fates which Zeus in Olympus dispenses. Many matters the gods bring to surprising ends. The things we thought would happen do not happen. The unexpected God makes possible." And such is the conclusion of the story. So ends the play this way. This terrible tale, told in less than 1,500 lines of verse in the original language and staged in an hour or two, points out and reiterates many sub-themes in addition to presenting fully the main theme, which is Medea's revenge against Jason. So some of the sub-themes are, number one, the destructive power of unshackled emotions. You might want to write some of these things down at the front of your play, or on one of the pages that's a blank page. You might want to say, these are some of the sub-themes. And you might want to also write down what the main theme was, which was back, we just said that it was Medea's revenge against Jason, because he let her down. He deserted her and sought for a better life, to lift him up in life. But here are the sub-themes. We see the destructive power of unshackled emotions. We see the saving virtue of moderation, or we don't actually see it, do we? We think of it, though. And we're going to learn a lot more about moderation from Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics when we read about the golden mean. You've probably heard a lot in your life, moderation in all things. Well, that's not a scripture in our religion, but it does come from Aristotle, which we'll talk more about that. Keeping your passions in the middle, between the two extremes. The third one is we see the place of woman in a man's world. And the chorus is prophecy that a new day is dawning for women. And on page 29 and 30, you see the chorus, and this is a chorus of women, and they say, "Legend will now reverse our reputation. A time comes when the female sex is honored. That old discordant slander shall no more hold us subject. Male poets of past ages with their ballads of faithless women shall go out of fashion, for Phoebus, prince of music, never bestowed the lyric inspiration through female understanding." Or we'd find themes for poems we'd counter with our epics against man. Oh, time is old, and in his store of tales, men figure no less famous or infamous than women. So you see that this feministic movement is not, the one that we see today is not a new thing. It has always been around. Ever since we've had an adversary on the earth who wants to cause contention, feminism has always been around in one form or another. And you see Euripides bringing this sub-theme up. Number 5 is the contrast between the barbarian and foreigner and the Greeks. So you see that the people of Greece hold themselves up higher than any other people in the world, and they call everybody else a foreigner or a barbarian. And you're going to see that in this play. And then the last sub-theme is that the idea that faith, or the gods have ordained these terrible things. And what has happened was bound to happen. Now, I hope we go into fate before this play, but if not, we need to talk about it in our class discussion. But it's really interesting how we can kind of understand fate in the way our Heavenly Father sees how we're going to act. He knows who we are. He can see from the very beginning to the end of our lives, and He can see what we chose to do each day of our life. He just knows. So, in a sense, the Greeks twisted that in a little way, and they just saw that, okay, well, the gods are the ones that are fating it. They're the ones that are saying what's going to happen in Julie Greenman's life. But in truth, and we know this because of the scriptures, that God can see the beginning and the middle and the end. In truth, He just knows, God knows what we're going to choose. So the idea of fate is, the Greeks feel like it's the gods that are making those choices for everybody, and the people are just following. But in truth, it's we are making those choices, and God just knows what we're going to do. So hopefully that helps you understand this idea of fate. And now your assignment is to go and read this play. It's not too long. You now know what the story is. You're going to come across a lot of lines that might not make a whole bunch of sense, just like you've been finding out in the other plays, but just push through and stick to it. And discuss with your peers, and we'll come together and discuss this play when we have a moment. All right, see you soon.